Welcome to Terrormouth, where the night doesn't just hold secrets, it remembers them. Story 1: The Shadows of Mill Creek. Mill Creek, Ohio, was a town no larger than a postcard, nestled between abandoned rail lines and thick forests. Its population hovered around 512, but the real story was in the shadows. Locals whispered about disappearances, sudden deaths, and fleeting figures glimpsed along the river at night. Most people dismissed them as tales, until the night of March 12, 2020, when the darkness swallowed more than just imagination. It began with the Harris family. Rachel Harris, a single mother, lived in a small house near the river's bend with her 2 children, Dylan and Emma. At 11:47 p.m., Rachel awoke to the sound of soft knocking on her bedroom window. She assumed it was the wind, but the tapping grew rhythmic, deliberate, impossible for a branch or animal. When she peered through the blinds, the yard was empty, only darkness. Dylan, 12, was the first to notice the shadows. He whispered that he could see figures moving along the tree line, too fast to be human, yet tall and thin, their limbs bending at unnatural angles. Emma, 8, was crying, saying the shadows were whispering her name. Rachel tried to calm them, dismissing it as nightmares. But then the lights flickered, and the whispers grew audible, hollow, chilling voices echoing from every corner of the house. Rachel grabbed her phone to call 911, but the signal was gone. No service, no dial tone. The shadows began to move closer, pooling around the edges of the living room like liquid darkness. Rachel noticed something impossible. The walls themselves seemed to bend, stretching upward, elongating the room unnaturally. The figures were inside, now hovering silently around the children, their faceless forms gliding without sound, their presence suffocating the air. Panicked, Rachel grabbed Dylan and Emma, running toward the front door. But the house had changed. Hallways twisted, stairs led to nowhere, and doors opened into the same dark hallway she had just left. Every exit she tried disappeared or looped back into the house's interior. The shadows moved in perfect synchronization, anticipating every step, forcing Rachel deeper into a labyrinthine nightmare she didn't understand. Meanwhile, in town, Officer Paul Kincaid was making his nightly patrol when his radio crackled with a strange static. A voice whispered through the interference, "Don't come." He assumed it was interference from the river's signal tower, until the voice repeated, "Don't come, or you'll see them." His patrol car lights flickered as he drove toward the Harris residence, but the road warped under his wheels. Trees bent inward, forming a tunnel that funneled him forward. Even the moonlight seemed to twist, bending unnaturally toward the horizon back in the house. Rachel stumbled into what seemed like a mirror hallway, every reflection showing distorted versions of her family, their faces elongated, eyes hollow, screaming silently. One of the shadows reached for Dylan, and Rachel's scream finally drew him toward Herb, but the boy's form wavered like smoke, and when her hands touched him, he wasn't there. Only darkness remained, and the whispers multiplied. "Join us. You can't leave." At exactly midnight, the house fell silent. The shadows vanished. The walls straightened. Rachel collapsed to the floor, clutching Emma, while Dylan was nowhere to be found. When Officer Kincaid finally arrived, the house seemed ordinary again. No warped hallways, no shadows, nothing to indicate the horror that had unfolded. Rachel tried to explain, but the officer found only her hysterical sobs credible. By morning, Dylan's disappearance made the front page of the small-town newspaper. Authorities found no leads, no footprints, no forced entry, no explanation. Only a strange darkness in the corner of the living room, faint and shifting as if breathing, waiting. Locals now avoid the Harris home after dark. They whisper that Mill Creek isn't haunted, it's alive, and it feeds on fear, twisting reality for those unfortunate enough to encounter it. And every night, from the edges of the town near the river, faint whispers can be heard, carried by the wind. "We're waiting for you." Rachel spent the next hours cradling Emma, too terrified to move, yet too aware that something had followed them into the normality of daylight. When Officer Kincaid returned with a search team, they found the living room empty, save for the faintest dark stain on the floor shifting subtly, like a shadow with its own pulse. The air felt thick, almost liquid, and every step closer made the hairs on their necks stand on end. By evening, Rachel made the impossible decision to enter the forest near the river where the shadows were first seen. Locals warned her, "Once you go past the creek after dark, you don't come back the same." But she had to find Dylan. The forest was unnaturally silent. Even the wind refused to move through the trees. Then she saw it, a faint glow, bobbing through the mist, identical to the shadows she had faced in her home. The shadows didn't attack, they lured. Each step toward the glow made the forest distort further. Trees leaned inward, forming corridors that twisted impossibly, pathways folding over themselves. Rachel felt the whispers again, echoing inside her head. "We have him. Come to join us, or he becomes one." Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt meaningless. She came to a clearing and froze. In the center stood Dylan, motionless, faceless, but unmistakably him. Around him, the shadows moved in a slow, synchronized dance, as though performing a ritual. The lantern-like glow from the river's edge now illuminated hundreds of unseen figures, all faceless, all suspended between reality and something else entirely. Rachel called out. Dylan turned slowly, and his mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Then she saw it. His body was hollow, as though the shadows had consumed his essence. The whispers grew louder, merging into a single voice that resonated in her bones. "Join us, or be left behind." Desperate, Rachel lunged forward. The shadows reacted instantly, swirling around her in a vortex of black mist. She could feel their touch, cold and impossible, pressing against her skin, crawling into her mind. Yet, just as they began to pull her in, she noticed a small opening gap in their formation, a path not fully consumed by darkness. She ran, blindly, feeling the whispers claw at her thoughts. Her lungs burned. Her legs ached. Behind her, she heard Dylan's hollow voice calling her name, not pleading, not crying, just echoing emptiness. She didn't look back. When she finally stumbled out of the forest, the glow of the lantern was gone. The whispers faded, replaced by the soft rustling of ordinary trees. By dawn, Mill Creek was normal again. Streets intact, houses straight, the river flowing calmly. Dylan was never found. Authorities chalked it up to an accident. Perhaps he wandered into the woods and got lost. But Rachel knew better. She carried the shadows with her in her mind. Sometimes, late at night, she would hear Dylan calling her from the darkness inside her head. The lantern's glow never returned, but the whispers had not ceased, they only waited. Locals say that the Harris house and the river bend where the shadows first emerged remain hotspots of unnatural phenomena. Lights flicker, whispers drift on the wind. and anyone brave or foolish enough to venture there after sunset may never return the same. Mill Creek was never truly haunted. It was alive, feeding on fear, and patient, always patient. And for those who hear the whispers, there is only one certainty: the shadows are waiting, and they are hungry. Story to the Lantern Bridge of Black Hollow. Black Hollow, West Virginia, was a town that few outsiders remembered by name. Fewer still visited after sunset. A rickety old bridge spanned the hollow creek that carved through the town, known locally as the Lantern Bridge. Generations whispered about travelers who had crossed it at night, only to vanish or return with empty eyes and hollowed voices. Most dismissed it as local superstition until October 17th, 2021. It began with Ethan and Claire Myers, a young couple who had moved into the outskirts of town. On a cold, moonless night, they decided to test the legend, crossing the bridge at the insistence of Claire, eager to capture paranormal footage for their social media. As they stepped onto the wooden planks, the air grew unnaturally still. The creek below reflected nothing, not even their own reflections. Halfway across, the first lantern appeared. A dim, flickering glow hovered above the water, swaying as if moved by an unseen hand. Claire laughed nervously, assuming it was some local prank. Ethan, however, felt a strange pull in his chest, a magnetic force urging him forward, whispering his name. Then the bridge began to change. The wood warped underfoot, lengthening in impossible ways. The air thickened, and soft, sorrowful whispers began echoing from the lantern's light. Ethan tried to step backward, but the bridge twisted, blocking retreat. Claire clutched his arm, but he noticed with growing horror that her eyes had gone dark, pupils dilated to the point of disappearance. Staring fixedly at the lantern, the whispers grew louder, forming words only Ethan could hear. Step into the light. Join us. Never leave. Panic surged. He tugged at Claire, but she moved on her own, drawn by the lantern. The water below bubbled as if alive, black ripples crawling toward the bridge's supports. Something unseen scratched at the underside of the planks, creating sounds that resonated through Ethan's bones. Suddenly, the lantern split into dozens of smaller lights, each circling them, forming an intricate, moving pattern. Ethan realized they weren't lights, they were vessels. Each glow contained faces, eyes wide in terror, mouths open in silent screams. He recognized one, a boy from town who had vanished decades ago. The others were more recent, countless missing from neighboring towns, their forms trapped inside the lanterns, repeating the same eternal terror. Ethan stumbled back, desperately seeking an exit, but the bridge had become infinite, stretching endlessly in both directions. The lanterns hovered closer, whispering secrets, revealing truths about the town he never wanted to know. Black Hollow was alive, feeding on the souls of those who dared cross the bridge at night. A gust of wind slammed into him. Shadows emerged from the lantern light, tall, spindly humanoid figures with glowing eyes, moving as though gliding just above the wood. Ethan realized they were the guardians of the bridge, keeping victims from turning back. Claire reached the center of the bridge. The lantern above her expanded, enveloping her in brilliant, suffocating light, and her scream echoed through the hollow, then vanished. Ethan fell to his knees, heart racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The bridge beneath him pulsed like a living thing, creaking and bending, whispering his name relentlessly. He could see shapes forming in the fog below, shadows that weren't reflections, but remnants of those who had crossed before, waiting for their next prey. By dawn, the bridge appeared normal again, as if nothing had happened. Claire was gone. The lanterns vanished. Ethan stumbled into town, frantic, incoherent, but the locals knew the signs. They avoided him and whispered among themselves. Another one saw the bridge at night. Another will disappear. Ethan never spoke publicly about the event, but at night he hears it, the soft flickering of lanterns, calling him back, whispering his name, reminding him that Black Hollow doesn't forget. And the bridge waits. Ethan spent the following days in a state of constant unease. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind reminded him of the bridge. Sleep was impossible. Dreams were invaded by the flickering lanterns, their soft light illuminating endless faces frozen in terror. Even when awake, he sometimes glimpsed shadows moving at the corner of his eyes, trailing him, whispering his name. 1 week later, unable to endure the torment, Ethan returned to the bridge. The town had tried to warn him. Black Hollow's legends were not just stories, but obsession had taken hold. He needed to see the truth, needed to understand the force that had taken Claire. As he approached the wooden planks, the air grew unnaturally cold. The creek below reflected a black void, not water. Lanterns emerged from the mist, hovering above the bridge, faintly pulsing. Some contained familiar faces, villagers who had disappeared over the years, their expressions eternally frozen in fear. And then he saw her, Claire, her face pale, eyes hollow, hovering in the largest lantern at the center. Her lips moved silently, forming words he could somehow hear. Ethan, come, it waits. The bridge warped again, stretching into an impossible corridor. Shadows tall, thin, featureless emerged from the lanterns, moving in a coordinated, predatory manner. Ethan tried to step back, but the planks bent under his weight, forcing him forward. Every fiber of his being screamed to turn, but the whispers now filled his mind, relentless. Step into the light. Join us. Never leave. In a moment of desperation, Ethan reached for Claire, trying to pull her free. But as his hand touched the lantern, a searing cold spread through his body. His vision blurred, his limbs stiffened, and the shadows surged, wrapping around him like a living fog. He felt his essence being drawn toward the lantern's glow, as though his soul was being siphoned into the endless void inside. He screamed, but sound did not leave his throat. The last thing he saw was the bridge stretching infinitely in both directions. Lanterns hovering like stars in a twisted night sky, each containing a soul trapped forever. Claire's silent lips formed one final word: welcome. By dawn, the bridge appeared ordinary again. Locals crossing in the morning noted the fog lingering over the creek, but nothing more. Black Hollow had claimed to more souls. Ethan and Claire were gone. Their disappearance joined the countless others, eternally bound to the lantern bridge, feeding the ancient, malevolent force that thrived on fear, curiosity, and the unwary to this day. Travelers and night wanderers report seeing flickering lanterns on the bridge, even when no one is there. They hear whispers, soft and persuasive, calling their names, promising guidance, then trapping them in a timeless, looping nightmare. Black Hollow waits patiently. The bridge waits patiently, and the lanterns, glowing faintly in the mist, are always hungry for the next visitor. No one in town dares to speak openly of the bridge, but a chilling warning is passed quietly to outsiders. If you ever see a lantern on the bridge at night, don't follow it. It wants you, and once it does, it never lets go. black hollow remains small, quiet, and deceptively peaceful by day. But at night, if you listen carefully, you can hear the soft flicker of the lanterns and the endless whispers of those who were foolish enough to cross the bridge. Story 3. The Black Smoke of Pine Creek. Pine Creek, Vermont, was a town seemingly frozen in time. Cobblestone streets, lantern-lit sidewalks, and Victorian homes gave it a quaint charm, but locals knew better. For decades, reports of a black smoke that moved like a living shadow had haunted the town's outskirts, particularly around the abandoned Whitmore factory on the edge of the forest. It began on November 5, 2022, when Alex Turner, a local journalist, decided to investigate the factory. Rumors claimed the smoke appeared at night, engulfing anyone who wandered too close, leaving behind only their screams and empty clothing. Determined to capture proof for his blog, Alex set out with his camera, tripod, and a handheld light. The factory loomed in the distance, a skeletal structure of broken windows and rusted metal. As Alex approached, the air grew colder. His flashlight flickered, and the forest seemed to bend inward, funneling him toward the factory. Then he saw it, a thin, undulating ribbon of black smoke crawling along the factory walls, moving independently, as though it had a mind of its own. At first, it appeared harmless, a mere shadow in the night. But then it thickened, forming shapes, twisted humanoid silhouettes that reached toward him without sound. Alex's camera captured the movement, but every time he blinked, the shapes seemed closer, pressing against the edges of reality. The shadows whispered, but the words were not human, they were echoes, distorted syllables that seemed to crawl inside his skull. Alex backed away, heart hammering, but the smoke advanced, faster than he could comprehend. It slithered along the ground, rising like a predator stalking prey. He turned to run, but the forest itself seemed to shift, trees leaning toward him, roots twisting unnaturally beneath his feet. Every step forward felt like walking through a viscous substance, as though reality itself resisted him. Inside the factory, Alex noticed old machinery moving on its own. Belts turned, wheels spun, but there was no one there. The smoke flowed through the halls like water, seeping under doors and windows, feeding on the emptiness. As he moved deeper, he stumbled upon a room covered in cryptic symbols, etched into walls and floorboards. A lingering chill made his skin crawl, and he realized the smoke was circling him in a deliberate pattern, herding him toward the center. Then he heard it a scream, piercing and unnatural, echoing from the depths of the factory. It wasn't human. It was layered, a chorus of agony trapped in one voice. Alex turned, and through his camera's night vision, he saw faint silhouettes suspended in the smoke, twisted forms of people long vanished. Their eyes were empty, mouths open in eternal terror, reaching toward him, panicked. Alex ran toward the exit, but the door led him deeper inside, into a long hallway lined with mirrors. Every reflection showed him differently, older, younger, distorted. One reflection smiled when he didn't. Another whispered secrets of the town. They belong to us. You will join them. The smoke followed him, a living entity, pulsing with malevolent intelligence, guiding him to an inescapable trap. Hours or perhaps minutes passed. Time felt meaningless. The moonlight outside bent strangely through broken windows, illuminating the smoke like liquid night. Alex realized the truth. The black smoke of Pine Creek was not a phenomenon. It was a collector of souls, a sentient darkness that had haunted the town for centuries, waiting for the curious, the brave, and the foolish to step too close. At the factory's center, a black vortex formed. The smoke swirled violently, and Alex's screams joined the cacophony, swallowed instantly by the darkness. When neighbors later reported strange noises and lights flickering at the old Whitmore factory, no one could explain it. Alex Turner had disappeared without a trace, leaving only his camera behind, still recording but showing nothing of what had truly occurred inside. Locals now whisper that if you pass Pine Creek at night, especially near the old factory, you may see black smoke curling unnaturally. And if it touches you, the town may claim your soul. Pine Creek seemed peaceful by day, but at night the shadows moved, waiting, watching, an hungry asterisk when the townspeople awoke the next morning. The Whitmore factory appeared silent and abandoned, as though nothing had disturbed it. No smoke, no lights, no movement. Only Alex Turner's camera lay on the cracked floor outside the main entrance. Its lens fogged, its battery inexplicably drained. Weeks passed, and Alex never returned. Locals whispered that he had joined the countless souls the smoke had collected over generations. Those brave enough to peek through the factory's broken windows claimed to see faint, shifting silhouettes inside, always moving, always watching, as if the building itself was alive. Then came the reports. Strange phenomena beyond the factory. Residents near the edge of Pine Creek described waking to cold spots, whispers in empty rooms, and fleeting shadows that vanished when approached. Pets refused to enter certain areas of town. Doors would slam shut on their own, and a faint black haze sometimes drifted along the streets at night, curling like tendrils of smoke. One night, a group of teenagers dared to enter the factory, cameras and flashlights in hand. They ventured to the center, where Alex had vanished. There, the black smoke waited. It emerged slowly at first, coiling around pillars, then forming humanoid shapes with glowing eyes, echoing the distorted faces of those it had claimed. The teenagers screamed as the smoke enveloped them, their bodies lifted off the ground, writhing, swallowed by darkness. Their terrified voices joined the chorus of the damned, repeating endlessly in the haunted factory by morning. The factory looked exactly the same, silent, empty, abandoned except for a faint trail of black residue leading from the central room out to the edge of the forest. Locals who dared approach the factory could swear they heard whispers calling their names, urging them to cross the threshold, promising secrets and forbidden knowledge. And every night, the black smoke would appear again, curling from the factory walls, hunting for the next curious soul to claim. Pine Creek seemed peaceful during the day, but those who walked its streets after sunset could feel it. The eyes of the smoke watching, calculating, patient. No one knew how old it was, or where it came from, only that it was alive, sentient, and insatiably hungry. The town learned the hard way that curiosity was dangerous, and anyone who ventured too close to the Whitmore factory after dark might vanish, leaving only whispers and shadows behind to this day. The legend of the black smoke of Pine Creek endures. Visitors are warned, do not approach the factory after sunset. If you see the black smoke, do not touch it, and never, under any circumstances, follow it, because those who do never return. Story for the Screaming Woods of Maple Ridge, Maine, was a sleepy town surrounded by dense forests. By day, it appeared idyllic, with maple trees lining cobblestone streets and children playing in sunlit parks. But locals avoided the forest on the outskirts at night, calling it the Screaming Woods. No one knew exactly why. only that those who entered after sunset rarely returned or came back changed, silent and staring. It was October 31st, 2023, when a group of friends, Mia Jordan and Tyler decided to test the legend. Armed with flashlights and recording equipment, they ventured past the forest's edge, laughing nervously. The air grew colder as they entered the dense canopy, the moonlight barely piercing the thick branches. At first, the forest was quiet, almost unnaturally so. No rustling leaves, no animal sounds, just the crunch of their footsteps on the fallen foliage. Then they heard it, a faint, high-pitched wail, almost like a human scream, echoing from deeper in the woods. Tyler laughed it off, saying it was the wind, but Mia felt her skin crawl. As they walked further, the screams became clearer, layered and overlapping, as if hundreds of voices were crying out simultaneously. The trio realized that the sounds were not coming from any one direction. The screams were all around them, surrounding them in a suffocating spiral. A thick fog began to rise from the forest floor, curling around their ankles like living tendrils. Mia's flashlight flickered, and in the brief flashes of light, they glimpsed shadowy figures darting between trees, humanoid but distorted, with elongated limbs and hollow eyes. Jordan raised his camera to capture footage, but the screen showed only blinking, static and faint, screaming silhouettes. The friends tried to retreat, but the forest seemed to shift. Paths they had walked moments ago twisted into unfamiliar corridors, trees bending unnaturally to block the way back. Tyler stumbled over a root, and when he looked up, he realized Mia and Jordan were no longer beside him. They were gone, absorbed into the fog. Panic set in. Tyler called out, but the screams drowned his voice. The fog thickened, forming shapes resembling his friends, reaching toward him with frozen, silent mouths. Each figure whispered his name in distorted echoes, pulling him toward the heart of the forest. Hours or perhaps minutes passed. Tyler lost track of time. The center of the screaming woods opened into a clearing where the moonlight revealed a massive tree, its bark blackened and twisted, with hundreds of faces pressed into its surface, screaming silently. Mia and Jordan were among them, their eyes wide, mouths open, forever etched into the tree. Tyler tried to flee, but the figures of his friends reached from the tree, grabbing at his arms, whispering, "Join us. You cannot leave." He ran blindly, following the narrowest path he could find, the screams chasing him relentlessly. When he finally burst from the forest, he collapsed on the road, panting, drenched in sweat. Maple Ridge seemed peaceful again at dawn. Tyler was the only one to emerge. He carried with him the indelible memory of the screaming woods, the twisted tree, the fog that moved like water, and the friends whose faces haunted him forever. Locals would warn that the forest was alive, a predator feeding on those foolish enough to enter at night. Tyler never spoke publicly about it, but he would hear their screams in his dreams, calling him back. Tyler awoke the next morning in his bed, drenched in sweat, the memory of the forest still vivid. But something was wrong. The screams had followed him home, faint at first, barely audible through the walls, growing louder with each nightfall. Every shadow in his room seemed to stretch unnaturally, and the air felt thick, heavy, as if the screaming woods had somehow followed him into Maple Ridge. Desperate, he tried to warn others. He told his parents, the police, anyone who would listen about the haunted forest and the blackened tree that imprisoned his friends' faces. But no one believed him. To the rest of Maple Ridge, the forest was just a quiet patch of woods, and Tyler appeared increasingly unhinged. One evening, determined to end the nightmare, Tyler returned to the edge of the forest. The fog greeted him immediately, curling like fingers around his ankles. The air smelled of decay and something far older than the trees themselves. As he ventured deeper, the screams began again, but this time, they were different, closer, angrier, almost impatient, as if the forest itself recognized him. He reached the clearing. The twisted, blackened tree stood at its center, faces pressed into the bark, screaming silently. Mia and Jordan stared at him, their eyes pleading, mouths open in eternal horror. Tyler reached out, his heart breaking, but as he touched the tree, the faces twitched, the mouths forming words. "You belong to us, forever." The fog surged forward, forming shadowy hands that wrapped around Tyler's limbs, pulling him toward the tree. He screamed, thrashing, but the forest resisted, bending reality itself to trap him. Each step closer to the tree felt like an eternity, and as he neared the center, the voices of the trapped multiplied, a deafening chorus of despair in a final, horrifying moment. Tyler felt his body pulled apart by the shadows, his essence sucked into the tree. He tried to scream, but his voice was absorbed into the forest. The last thing he saw was his own face pressed into the bark beside Mia and Jordan, their silent screams merging into his own dot. By dawn, the forest appeared calm. The fog dissipated, and the screaming woods returned to their deceptively peaceful state. The town of Maple Ridge carried on as if nothing had happened. But those who dared approach the forest at night would hear the faint whispering of names. The soft, pleading screams carried on the wind, warning that the forest never lets go. Locals now speak in hushed tones of Tyler, Mia, and Jordan, warning anyone curious enough to enter the forest. Do not go near the screaming woods. Once it calls your name, it will never release you. The trees remember, and the fog waits, patiently, eternally, for the next soul. Maple Ridge seems safe by day, but at night the screaming woods are alive, hungry, and relentlessly waiting for those who dare to enter. Story 5. The Haunting of Willow Lane. Willow Lane, Pennsylvania, was a quiet street lined with Victorian homes, its charm hiding a dark secret. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the Waters family house, an abandoned mansion at the end of the lane. For decades, anyone who stayed there overnight reported visions, whispers, and objects moving on their own. Most dismissed it as superstition, until the Marshall siblings decided to investigate. On a stormy October night in 2023, Emma and her younger brother, Lucas, arrived at the mansion armed with flashlights, cameras, and recording devices. The wind howled through broken windows, and the rain hammered against the roof, as though warning them to turn back. But the siblings pressed on, eager to capture evidence for their paranormal blog. The house was a time capsule of decay. Wallpaper peeled, furniture rotted, and the scent of damp wood filled the air. As they explored, Emma noticed the old grandfather clock in the hall ticking erratically, its hands spinning backward. Lucas froze as a cold whisper echoed through the hall, "Leave, before it wakes." Ignoring the warning, they continued upstairs. The walls seemed to close in, shadows stretching unnaturally. In the master bedroom, Emma spotted a doll in the corner, its eyes following her movements. Suddenly, the room temperature plummeted. Their breath visible in the flashlight's beam, the doll moved on its own, turning to face them with a twisted grin. A loud crash downstairs startled them. Rushing down, they saw the furniture rearranged, chairs stacked unnaturally. and a mirror reflecting the hallway, but the reflections were wrong. Their images were distorted, elongated, faces frozen in silent screams. Emma felt her pulse quicken as the whispers grew louder, layered and overlapping, surrounding them. The siblings attempted to leave, but the front door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The house seemed alive, breathing, groaning, its walls pulsating. Faint, shadowy figures emerged, moving just out of the flashlight's range. Emma grabbed Lucas's hand, trying to run, but the shadows blocked their path, her voice trembling as she whispered, "It's following us." In the dining room, they discovered a wall covered in names scratched into the wood, some fresh, others decades old. Among them were names they recognized from the town's missing persons list. The air thickened, heavy with a malevolent presence. The siblings realized the house was a trap, feeding on fear and curiosity, collecting the souls of those who dared enter. Suddenly, the chandelier above them swayed violently. A deep, guttural growl reverberated through the floorboards. Emma and Lucas were pushed backward as the shadows coalesced into a towering figure, faceless, cloaked in darkness, its hands reaching toward them. The room seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls bending, warping, making escape impossible. In a desperate bid, Emma grabbed a candle from the mantel and lit it. The figure recoiled at the flame, hissing, shadows writhing like smoke. But the relief was brief. The shadows surged around them, whispers now screaming in unison, promising pain, eternity, and silence. They had awoken something ancient in Willow Lane, something that would not release them easily. Hours or maybe minutes passed. The siblings felt the house shifting, guiding them toward the basement. The door creaked open on its own, revealing a pit filled with dozens of skeletal dolls, each one wearing fragments of clothing that looked eerily human. Emma realized with horror that the house had been collecting more than just fear. It had been trapping bodies, draining life, and preserving them in grotesque form. Panicked, Emma and Lucas backed away, but the shadows closed in. A voice, deep and guttural, resonated from the walls. "Welcome home. You belong to us now." The candle flickered out, plunging them into darkness, the whispers overwhelming. The mansion seemed to pulse with life, as if it were breathing. The darkness inside the mansion was suffocating. Emma fumbled for her flashlight, but the batteries had died. The shadows pressed closer, whispering her name, Lucas's name, over and over, in a chorus of twisted echoes. Every step forward felt heavier, as though the house itself resisted their escape. In the basement, the pit of skeletal dolls seemed to pulse, the fragments of clothing shifting, almost alive. The siblings realized the dolls were the previous victims, preserved in a grotesque mimicry of life, their expressions frozen in eternal terror. The shadows crawled along the walls, forming elongated fingers that reached for Emma and Lucas. A sudden shriek echoed through the house, louder and more piercing than any scream they had heard before. The towering, faceless figure from the dining room appeared at the top of the basement stairs, coalescing from the writhing shadows. Its presence was overwhelming, an oppressive force that sucked the warmth from the air. Emma grabbed Lucas, running toward the narrow stairs leading to a back exit, but the door dissolved before her eyes, replaced by a wall of twisting shadows. The house was no longer a structure of wood and stone, it had become a living entity, its walls bending, ceilings stretching, floors pulsing like a heartbeat in a last desperate attempt. Emma screamed, hoping someone outside could hear, but the walls swallowed the sound. The shadows lunged, and she felt icy fingers pierce her arms, pulling her toward the basement pit. Lucas was dragged to the opposite side, his terrified eyes locking with hers. The siblings screamed, struggling against the relentless darkness. But the house had claimed them as it had claimed countless others. Then, silence days later, townspeople reported strange occurrences around the Waters mansion. Lights flickered in the windows at night, faint whispers carried through the wind, and some claimed to see shadowy figures moving just beyond the broken curtains. The house stood unchanged, waiting patiently for the next curious souls inside. Emma and Lucas remained, preserved like the dolls in the basement. Their eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams, forever part of the house's collection. It was said that if you enter the mansion after sunset, the shadows will invite you in, and the house will never let you go. Locals now warn, Willow Lane is not safe at night. The mansion is hungry. It remembers every face, every scream, and it waits patiently for the next ones who dare enter. The mansion seems calm by day, the street quiet, but at night the shadows stir, and if you listen closely, you can hear the whispers of Emma, Lucas, and the countless souls trapped within, calling for someone foolish enough to follow them into the darkness. Story 6, The Lighthouse of Hollow Point, Maine, was a tiny fishing town with a coastline that locals said was cursed. At the edge of the cliffs stood an abandoned lighthouse, its glass windows shattered, metal rusted, and walls blackened by decades of storms. Fishermen and townsfolk warned travelers to stay away, especially at night, claiming that anyone who ventured near the lighthouse after dark often disappeared or returned changed, silent or insane. It was December 2023 when Eric Dawson, a freelance journalist obsessed with the paranormal, arrived in Hollow Point. He had heard the stories of the lighthouse, faint lights flickering at night, strange sounds of crying, and sailors claiming to see ghostly figures on the cliffs. Determined to capture evidence, Eric ignored warnings and decided to spend a night inside the lighthouse. The air was bitterly cold as he climbed the cliff path, wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. The lighthouse loomed above him, its decaying structure creaking as if alive. Stepping inside, Eric's flashlight illuminated the interior, rusted spiral stairs, peeling paint, and old maritime equipment scattered across the floor. Every step echoed through the hollow tower. At first, the place was silent. Then he heard it, a faint scratching like nails on metal, coming from the top of the spiral staircase. Heart pounding, he called out, but his voice was swallowed by the wind and the structure's emptiness. Determined, he ascended the staircase, each step groaning under his weight. Near the top, the temperature dropped sharply. Eric's breath fogged in the air, and he noticed handprints appearing on the walls, blackened and wet, as if invisible fingers had touched the surface moments ago. The lighthouse's light flickered on its own, casting long, distorted shadows that stretched across the circular walls. At the lantern room, Eric's flashlight began to malfunction. In the intermittent flashes, he saw them, ghostly figures of sailors, translucent eyes hollow, drifting through the walls, murmuring unintelligible words. One figure reached out toward him with a skeletal hand, vanishing when his light landed fully upon it. The lighthouse seemed alive, responding to his presence. Whispers grew into shouts, overlapping voices screaming for release, warning him to leave. As Eric moved to leave, the spiral staircase behind him twisted impossibly. Steps disappeared, railings warped, He realized with horror that the lighthouse was trapping him inside, bending space to keep him within. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the lantern room. Eric ran toward it, finding the old lighthouse lens shattered, shards reflecting dozens of ghostly faces. One face turned toward him, his own, pale and terrified, screaming silently. Panic overtook him. The air became heavy, and the shadows coalesced into a towering figure in the center of the room. Its form made of smoke, rust, and water, eyes glowing with unnatural light. The figure spoke, its voice like waves crashing against rocks. "You shouldn't have come. Now you belong to the lighthouse." The walls pulsed, and Eric felt himself being pulled toward the center. The floorboards bending, fog and shadows enveloping him. Outside, Hollow Point remained calm, with only the faint sound of the sea and wind. The lighthouse sat dark and silent, waiting patiently for its next visitor. Its cursed light extinguished, but only for now. The shadows swallowed Eric completely, dragging him toward the center of the lantern room. The smoke and water figure towered above him, its glowing eyes fixed on his terrified face. The lighthouse groaned, walls bending and twisting as though it were alive, reshaping itself to hold him forever. Eric tried to scream, but his voice was muffled, absorbed by the swirling mist and the groaning structure. The ghostly sailors drifted around him, silent and hollow-eyed, their hands reaching for him. Each touch sent waves of icy pain through his body. He realized with horror that the lighthouse didn't just trap people that fed on them, merging their essence into its walls and the shadows. Desperate, Eric grabbed a shard of glass from the shattered lens and swung it at the looming figure. The smoke recoiled, hissing, and for a brief moment, Eric felt a shred of hope. But the relief was short-lived. The figure lunged forward, absorbing the shard into its form, twisting Eric's reflection in its glowing eyes. His own face stared back at him, distorted in silent terror. Time lost all meaning. Eric felt himself being pulled into the lighthouse itself, the spiral staircase collapsing, walls pressing in. He caught glimpses of past victims, their faces frozen in pain. Twisted in the shadows, silent screams etched into the very wood and stone. Among them, the lighthouse had already claimed hundreds over the centuries. Finally, the figure's glowing eyes consumed his vision, and he felt his body dissolve, merging with the smoke and shadows. His screams became whispers, joining the chorus of the trapped souls, forever bound to the lighthouse. Outside, the wind howled, carrying faint, agonized cries over the cliffs and into the town of Hollow Point. The lighthouse appeared calm once again, its structure battered by storms but seemingly inert. Locals say that sometimes at night, a faint light flickers at the top, though no one is inside. Those who pass by report hearing whispers calling their names, shadows that move against the wind, and a presence that watches from the cliffs. Fishermen still warn visitors. The lighthouse waits. Once it sees you, it never forgets. It remembers every face, every scream, and one day, it will call you home. Hollow Point remained picturesque in daylight, but when darkness falls, the lighthouse is alive, hungry, an eternal sentinel of shadows, claiming any soul foolish enough to enter after sunset.
Story 7. The Forgotten Orphanage of Black Hollow. Black Hollow, Vermont, was a small town with a sinister past. At the edge of the forest stood an abandoned orphanage, a massive brick building with shattered windows, rusting gates, and ivy strangling its walls. Locals whispered that decades ago, children who lived there had vanished mysteriously, and the institution was shut down overnight. The building was left to rot, but stories persisted of strange cries, shadows moving inside, and apparitions wandering the halls. It was November 2023 when college student and urban explorer Rachel Monroe arrived in Black Hollow. Fascinated by paranormal legends, she intended to document the orphanage for her online channel. Armed with a camera, flashlight, and voice recorder, she stepped through the rusted gates as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across the property. The air inside the orphanage was heavy and cold, carrying the faint scent of decay and something sweeter, almost like rotting candy. Rachel explored the entryway, her flashlight flickering as it swept across peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and graffiti scrawled with desperate names. Each step echoed through the cavernous halls, blending with distant, ghostly whispers. As she entered the children's dormitory, she noticed the beds arranged strangely, some stacked atop one another, others tipped against the walls. She paused when she saw a small, tattered doll staring at her from the floor. Its eyes seemed to glimmer in the dim light, unnaturally aware, and the whispers grew louder. "Rachel, play with us." Chills ran down her spine. She recorded her surroundings, speaking into the camera, but her voice seemed to distort, echoing back in whispers that weren't her own. She moved to the next room, a classroom frozen in time, with desks scattered and chalk still on the blackboard. As her flashlight beam passed over the walls, she saw handprints, tiny and smeared, appearing as if children had pressed them moments ago. Rachel reached the basement. The air turned icy, and the flashlight flickered violently. She descended the stairs, hearing faint giggles, then sobbing, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. The walls seemed to pulse subtly, like a heartbeat, as if the building itself were alive. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked behind her. Turning, Rachel glimpsed shadowy figures darting in and out of the darkness, small silhouettes with elongated limbs and hollow eyes. She tried to back away, but the shadows multiplied, forming a wall of moving darkness that pressed closer, whispering, laughing, calling her name. Her recorder picked up a new sound, a deep, distorted chanting in a language she couldn't recognize. The shadows began to converge, and the whispers morphed into screams. Rachel realized the children hadn't just disappeared, their spirits were trapped, bound to the orphanage, feeding on the fear of anyone who dared enter. Desperate, Rachel ran toward the exit, but the doors slammed shut. Windows became opaque, and the walls shifted, corridors stretching impossibly, leading her deeper into the building. Each room she entered seemed familiar yet wrong, hallways looping back on themselves, classrooms filled with unseen children, and shadows crawling along every surface. Finally, she arrived at the main hall, a massive atrium where a faint glow pulsed in the center. There, she saw a pile of dolls, each one grotesquely lifelike, wearing fragments of clothing resembling children from decades past. The glow came from the dolls' eyes, glowing faintly red, each one staring directly at her. Rachel froze as the whispers intensified, surrounding her from all directions. The walls of the atrium groaned as if the building itself were awakening. From the center of the doll pile, a figure rose, a small child, taller than it should be, with elongated limbs, pale skin, and hollow, burning eyes. It spoke with multiple voices layered together, "You can't leave, you're ours now." Before she could react, the shadows surged, pulling her toward the center of the room. The air thickened, her flashlight flickered out, and her scream was absorbed into the building itself. The orphanage had claimed her. Outside, Black Hollow remained quiet, the wind rustling through dead leaves. Locals knew better than to approach the orphanage at night. Those who did never returned, or if they did, they spoke incoherently, haunted by whispers and fleeting glimpses of children with hollow eyes. Rachel struggled against the shadows, her limbs heavy as if the very air conspired to hold her. The pile of dolls in the atrium quivered and shifted, each face twisting into silent screams. The elongated child figure at the center reached toward her, its multiple layered voices echoing in her mind, "Stay, forever, play with us." In a desperate attempt, Rachel grabbed one of the dolls from the pile. The instant her fingers touched it, she felt a surge of cold pain, a flood of memories that weren't hers, childhood horrors, screams, and endless isolation. She realized that the orphanage didn't just trap souls, it absorbed them, blending their essence into its very walls, feeding on their fear, preserving them in the dolls' grotesque forms. The shadows pressed closer, enveloping her completely. She screamed, but her voice merged with the whispers of the trapped children. She saw fleeting visions of past victims, their hollow eyes pleading silently. The elongated figure loomed above her, and the dolls on the floor shifted, forming a living circle that constricted around her, cutting off any escape. Outside, the wind howled through the empty town, carrying faint, distorted cries. Inside, the orphanage seemed to breathe, pulsating like a living organism, walls stretching impossibly, corridors twisting endlessly. Rachel felt herself being lifted off the ground, her body dissolving into the same shadows she had tried to resist. Her last thought was of the children, she was joining them, becoming part of the building's eternal collection. By dawn, Black Hollow appeared tranquil, the orphanage silent and abandoned. But if anyone passed by, they could feel it, the building watching, waiting, and whispering faintly for the next curious soul. Locals kept their distance, warning, never enter the orphanage after dark. Once it sees you, it never forgets. It collects everyone who dares to linger too long. And for Rachel Monroe, the town would remember her too, not as a visitor, but as a new resident of the orphanage, her face now one among the dolls, her whispers joining the countless others trapped inside, forever haunting the halls of Black Hollow.
Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Terrormouth.